Experts are increasingly talking about a banking crisis coming, not just in the United States, but in other Western countries. Delinquent commercial real estate loans at U.S. banks have hit their highest level in a decade, as higher interest rates and an uncertain economy and the rise of remote working pile pressure on building owners. That's what the Financial Times said, and there are stacks of other headlines about how Western banks could be facing some serious problems. You may not think that JP Morgan or Bank of America or wherever the big bank where you are is going to have a problem, but small and mid-sized banks could substantially have a problem. And look at what that did in 2023 to other bank stocks in the U.S. Look at the panic that caused. Look at how that reshaped the banking landscape. And so there is growing concern that the next economic shock in the U.S. will be caused by the growing level of vacancy in commercial real estate. None of these are my words. This is all what publications we've been reading around the world are saying. This is not just happening in the United States, though. Germany's commercial real estate plunge could be a threat for banks. That's according to Euronews, who says that Europe's rapidly deteriorating commercial real estate crisis could potentially impact its banks as well. And so now in Germany, you have more developers facing bankruptcies. Several commercial and residential projects have been abandoned or postponed. Even in typically resilient Ireland, the analysts have now said there's no likelihood of a knock-on effect, but there have been price drops. This is the kind of thing we share insights on at Nomad Capitalist Live. It's our 4-day annual event. Danielle DiMartino Booth is speaking this year. She's a former Federal Reserve insider who knows what to make of this kind of thing. How should you adjust your investments? Go to nomadcapitalist.com/live and you can learn about joining us at that annual event. But I'm going to tell you what I think you should do, and that is what I always tell you to do, is diversify.
If you're interested in getting a better return on your money, passive income and cash flow, tax benefits that could reduce your taxable income, and inflation protection, all while building a legacy of wealth you can leave to your heirs, then you need to get this free guide on the single most important alternative investment to diversify your retirement income. All you need to do is click the link in the description or type in the URL you see on the screen to learn more.
The Western banking systems are run somewhat differently than banking systems around the world. Let's just talk about the offshore effect. There are offshore banks, often in tax havens or on small islands, where they're just going to store your money for you. They're not going to go out and loan your money out to commercial developers. And even the ones that do, generally speaking, they're not running up 300% ratios. They might go out and do properties at low LTVs, but there are literally offshore banks. They don't make loans. They are full reserve. They keep all your money there. And if that's something that you're looking for, there are offshore banks from the Caribbean to the Cook Islands that offer those kinds of services. And so what those banks do is they have relationships with larger banks around the world. Your money's not just sitting under a mattress somewhere in the Cook Islands. They move your money around, but it is not being loaned out. That's one benefit of offshore banking. But besides that, you look at banks in any number of countries, they are more stable, better, capital ratios, just better run than some of these Western banks, where I think the culture comes into play here. If you think that your economy is so secure and your country's always going to be on top, you're probably going to take more risks. And we're seeing that Western economies aren't always going to be on top. People are realizing the charade is over. Western economies, they're starting to see the cracks. People are realizing it's not all it's cracked up to be, but somehow the banks are still being more aggressive. You go to some of the Asian countries, and they are much more conservative in how they lend money out. That's partially why it's harder to get accounts at some of those banks, because they don't need more money. They have enough money. They can't figure out what to do with the money they have. And so Hong Kong, Singapore, I'll put my money in those banks over Western economies every single day. And I'll take the advantage if I'm an American that I can actually hold different currencies overseas, because I might want to diversify my currency exposure. But the bottom line is you want to be diversified, and you want to do that from a perspective of understanding what's different between your country and the rest. I think there's more risk in a number of these Western economies where they just assumed the party would never end. That is something that does not culturally exist in many countries around the world. I think in Asia, for example, they're more methodical.
They warn that a recession is right around the corner and the market will crash, vaporizing America's retirement accounts. Here's what you need to know. Economists are pressing the panic button. Harry Dent says we're facing the bubble of all bubbles. He predicts a stock market crash worse than the 2008 crisis. During that time, 401ks became known as 101ks or 201ks, and America lost $10.2 trillion in collective wealth. He's not the only one warning about the inevitable. Wall Street legend Gary Shilling believes the economy is heading into a full-blown recession. As a result, he sees the market plunging by 30%, and that's at the very least. John Hussman, president of the Hussman Investment Trust, believes stock prices are at their peak. He predicts the S&P 500 could crash 65%, erasing a decade of stock market gains. In other words, stocks are a bad, very bad gamble right now. The only alternative is to find out how to build wealth without Wall Street. Inside the pages of my new book, you'll discover the asset class that exists outside of Wall Street's control. An asset class that weathers economic storms and still generates outsized returns. Now it's finally accessible by the rest of us. This book shows you how to use it to secure retirement, no matter what happens in the stock market. But you don't want to wait until we're in a full-blown crisis. You'll want to discover the wealth-building secrets in this book today. Click the link in the description below to get your copy.
Probably in some of the countries in the Gulf, more methodical. What I would suggest is either look at some of the banks where they don't lend your money out. That could be part of your banking portfolio. Also look at banks in a place like Singapore, where non-residents can get accounts for mid-six-figure sums. Can I diversify some of my money there? You don't have to move your money offshore. Now, there may be forms you have to file in any of these countries, and I suggest that you do file the forms and make sure that the government and the tax man knows where your money is, if that's a legal requirement. That's some of the tax professionals that we work with in our network do help our clients do, because we believe in legal tax reduction, legal diversification. So let's say I'm an American and I live in the United States. You don't have to leave the United States to move your money. You can go either through power of attorney, either through remote account opening in some jurisdictions, or maybe in the case of Singapore, you have to go there, for example. Make a little trip, open a bank account, move some money. You had money in one account, now you have money in another account. In addition to the ability to diversify into different currencies, in addition to some form of light asset protection, you now have a bank that is stronger. And all you've got to do is look at the list of the world's 50 strongest banks. There's maybe one that's in the United States. All three of the big banks in Singapore are on there. And by the way, so are the banks in Canada. You may not like those for different reasons, the more of the social reasons. But, banks in Singapore, some of the most neutral-minded, some of the most objective, and some of the strongest banks that you'll find in the world. So money in a U.S. bank or an Australian bank or a British bank, it's the same money in the Singaporean bank, but with, in my opinion, less funny business going on,